It begins in silence. Only the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic blip of a heart monitor cut through the darkness. The sterile glow of the operating room reflects off stainless steel instruments, lined neatly like soldiers waiting for command. The camera drifts across the scene. Clamps, scalpels, gloved hands preparing in quiet precision. Then a voice breaks the stillness. It's calm, deliberate, yet heavy. "My name is Dr. Michael Grant," it says. "I've been a surgeon for over 20 years. I've seen life begin and end, but one night I saw something I still can't explain." The sound of the heart monitor quickens as the narration continues. Dr. Grant recounts that night, 10 years ago, when a routine surgery became a haunting memory. His patient was a 32-year-old woman named Rebecca Hale, young, healthy, full of life. "It was supposed to be simple," he says. "A laparoscopic gallbladder removal. We do thousands of them every year. Inside the operating room, the team moves with steady confidence. The anesthesiologist leans in, murmuring, 'Count backward from 10, Rebecca.' Her voice trails off at 7. Monitors show strong vitals, stable heart rate, clear airway, everything exactly as expected. The camera focuses on Dr. Grant's eyes, calm, focused, as he makes the first incision. And then everything changes. Without warning, the steady beeps from the monitor begin to stutter. The anesthesiologist frowns, adjusting dials. Pressure's dropping, someone says. A few seconds later, alarms erupt. The heart rate plummets to 0, flatline. "Code blue!" Chaos replaces calm. A nurse rushes to grab the crash cart. "Starting compressions," another shouts. Dr. Grant's voice tightens. "Epinephrine, 1 milligram IV, now." The narration slows, words measured between the noise. "I've seen cardiac arrests. I know the rhythm of emergency, but this didn't make sense. There was no bleeding, no medication error, no trauma. Rebecca's heart had simply stopped." The camera pans across frantic faces, sweat glistening under bright lights, gloved hands pressing down on her chest, the rise and fall of effort and disbelief. Minutes stretch into eternity. "5 minutes down," someone calls out. The air feels heavy, suffocating. Dr. Grant's voice trembles in the retelling. "We kept going. 10 minutes. Still nothing. No electrical activity, no pulse. And I remember thinking, she's gone." He pauses, the silence weighted with years of regret. But something inside me, I don't know what, told me not to stop. He orders one last round of compressions. "Come on, Rebecca," he whispers under his breath. "Come back." The flatline holds, then flickers. One faint blip, then another. The room freezes. The monitor beeps again, slow, uneven, alive. "We have a rhythm," someone says, disbelief thick in their voice. Dr. Grant steps back, sweat dripping down his mask. "We got her back," he says softly. But even then, he knew something about that moment wasn't normal. "She was gone for 12 minutes, he says in voiceover. And when she opened her eyes again, she remembered things she shouldn't have been able to see. The final lines hang heavy. That night, I lost her twice. Once on the table and once in my understanding of what's possible." The lights dim, the monitor steadies. But the echo of that flat line seems to linger, long after the scene fades to black. Before Rebecca Hale became a mystery that haunted medicine, she was simply a woman trying to keep up with life. The voice of Dr. Grant softens as the documentary shifts from the sterile light of the operating room to the warmth of home videos. Rebecca laughing as her 2 young children chase her across a sunlit yard, her husband Daniel filming from behind the camera. "That was Rebecca," Daniel says quietly. Always moving, always laughing. She made ordinary days feel bigger. Rebecca lived in suburban Ohio, worked part-time as a fitness instructor, and volunteered at her kids' school. She'd always been healthy, strong, full of energy. But early that spring, she began experiencing sharp pains beneath her ribs, the kind that came and went without warning. A series of scans revealed the culprit: gallstones. Nothing life-threatening, just something that needed routine surgery. Dr. Grant remembers her consultation vividly. She was nervous, he says, but not fearful. She kept apologizing for asking too many questions. He'd reassured her. The procedure was quick, safe, straightforward. "It's one of the most common surgeries in America," he told her. "You'll be home before dinner." Daniel's voice enters again, soft but steady. That morning, she kissed the kids goodbye, joked that she'd have a few new scars to show them. She wasn't scared, just ready to get it over with. As the scene unfolds, the camera lingers on small, intimate details. Rebecca's neatly folded clothes on the hospital chair, a bracelet on her wrist, engraved with her children's initials, a hospital bracelet tagged Hale, Rebecca, 32, female. The narrator's tone turns reflective. "Every surgeon has patients like Rebecca," Dr. Grant says. "Healthy, optimistic, trusting. We never think a case like that will be the one that changes everything." In voiceover, he describes how medical charts never capture the essence of the person lying on the table. You see the numbers, the vitals, the diagnosis, But you don't see the mother who hums lullabies when she's nervous, or the woman who tells the anesthesiologist to make sure her eyeliner doesn't smudge. Then comes a subtle hint of what's to come. A nurse mentions how Rebecca had once woken up unusually aware during a dental procedure years earlier. She described hearing voices and seeing light before the anesthesia took full effect. It was brushed off as anxiety, nothing medically significant. But to Dr. Grant, in hindsight, that detail feels chilling. Medicine teaches us to dismiss coincidences, he says softly. But looking back, maybe we shouldn't. The section closes with Daniel's final words, his voice trembling slightly. She told me not to worry. She said, "It's just surgery. I'll see you tonight." He pauses, staring at an old photograph of Rebecca smiling at the beach. I didn't know that would be the last thing she said before everything went wrong. The camera fades to black, leaving only the echo of that promise. "I'll see you tonight." The sound of the heart monitor returns, a rapid, erratic rhythm that suddenly collapses into a flat, unbroken tone. The lights of the operating room seem brighter now, almost harsh, as if the world itself has turned sterile and unforgiving. Dr. Grant's voice trembles slightly in narration. Her vitals just vanished. One moment she was stable, the next she was gone. There was no warning, no sign, just silence. Inside the operating room, chaos reigns. A nurse calls out, "No pulse?" Another prepares the defibrillator. Charging. 200 joules. The paddles press against Rebecca's chest. The current jolts through her body, but the monitor remains flat. Again and again. Still nothing. "Come on, Rebecca," someone mutters under their breath, their voice cracking. Dr. Grant describes the desperate rhythm of those minutes, a blur of adrenaline, hands, and commands. "We worked for 12 minutes, he recalls. It doesn't sound long, but in an OR, it's an eternity. Every second feels like sand slipping through your fingers." He pauses, the camera lingering on his face as he stares at the memory. "And we did everything right. The medications, the compressions, the shocks, everything. But there was nothing. She wasn't coming back." The documentary shifts to slow, haunting shots of surgical tools lying motionless, the once urgent team now frozen in exhaustion. A nurse removes her gloves with trembling hands. "Time of death?" someone asks quietly. Dr. Grant doesn't answer. He just stares at the monitor, and then it happens, a single blip, soft at first. Then another. The flat line breaks into life. The room erupts in disbelief. "We've got a rhythm," the anesthesiologist shouts. Everyone freezes, staring at the impossible. Her heart rate climbs, oxygen levels stabilize. Against every medical law, Rebecca's heart has started beating again. Dr. Grant exhales, still shaking his head as he recounts it. There was no intervention, no new drug, nothing to explain it. She was gone, and then she wasn't. The narration slows, deepens, and we prepared for brain injury, oxygen deprivation, the worst-case scenarios, but when we ran the scans, there was nothing. No damage. Her body was perfectly fine. It was as if her heart had just decided to start again. He speaks softly, haunted. Science has boundaries. But that night, something stepped over them. Days later, Rebecca opens her eyes in the ICU. Her husband Daniel is by her side, his face pale from sleepless nights. She blinks, confused, then whispers, "Where's Dr. Grant?" Nurses exchange glances, calling him in. When he enters the room, she studies him, eyes glassy but alert. "You were crying," she says faintly. He freezes. "What?" "In the operating room," she murmurs. "You said, 'Come on, Rebecca.'" "Come back." The air in the ICU turns thick with disbelief. Those words, the ones she couldn't have heard, couldn't have known, are exactly what he'd whispered during CPR. No one had told her. No one could have. Dr. Grant's narration takes over again, quiet, shaken. I'd spoken those words under my breath, barely audible, while she was clinically dead. There was no heartbeat, no brain activity, no awareness. Yet she remembered. The section closes with Dr. Grant sitting in his dimly lit office, the glow of the monitor reflecting off his tired eyes. "I've always trusted medicine," he says softly. But that night, it failed to explain the one thing that mattered most, how she came back at all. The heart monitor fades out, replaced by silence once more, a silence filled with questions that science still cannot answer. The tone shifts to stillness. The bright intensity of the operating room dissolves into a soft, dreamlike haze. Rebecca's voice emerges, delicate and distant, like someone recalling a half-remembered dream. "I wasn't afraid," she says. "At least, not after the first few seconds. I knew I wasn't in my body anymore." The camera floats slowly upward, mimicking her experience as she describes it. Weightless, detached, hovering above the operating table. "I could see them," she continues. "The doctors, the nurses, everyone moving so fast. I heard every word they said." Her voice overlaps with reenacted whispers from the surgical team. "No pulse. Start compressions. Again." She describes the way a nurse's hand shook as she prepared a syringe, and how Dr. Grant pressed his gloved hands against her chest. whispering something she couldn't quite understand, until later, when she remembered every syllable. The narration from Dr. Grant returns, quieter now, more introspective. When she told me what she saw, I felt my stomach drop. Every detail was correct, things she couldn't possibly have known. Rebecca recounts one detail after another, the sound of a surgical clamp hitting the floor, the anesthesiologist adjusting the IV line near her head, and even a light fixture flickering above the doorway. Each one, when checked later, matched the surgical log and the staff's recollections. I wasn't dreaming, she says firmly. I was watching. Then her voice softens, trembling. After that, everything just shifted. The room faded. The light changed. I wasn't above the table anymore. I was somewhere else. The visuals turn ethereal, a tunnel of soft gold light stretching endlessly ahead. It wasn't a tunnel exactly, she explains. It was more like warmth pulling me forward. It felt familiar, safe. She pauses, tears in her eyes. There was someone there, or something. I couldn't see a face, but I felt it. It didn't speak with words. It just knew me. It told me I wasn't done yet, that I had to go back. For a moment, her voice breaks. I didn't want to. It felt so peaceful, like I was finally home. Dr. Grant's voice cuts through the silence. I've seen people close to death before. I've watched life slip away. But I've never heard anyone describe it like that. Not with that kind of detail or that kind of calm. He sits quietly in his office, the weight of memory pressing down. You spend your life studying anatomy, physiology, biology, but then someone like Rebecca comes along, and she makes you wonder if there's more to us than cells and neurons. The section closes with Rebecca's final reflection. People think I saw heaven. I don't know what I saw, but I do know this. Whatever it was real. More real than anything I've ever felt. Her eyes glistened in the hospital light. And when I woke up, I missed it. The screen fades to black, her words lingering like a whisper between two worlds. The story picks up in the quiet hum of recovery. The hospital now calm, sterile, ordinary again. But beneath that calm, a ripple of unease runs through the staff. Rebecca Hale's survival, and her story, has begun to circulate in hushed tones. In the ICU break room, nurses whisper about her. Some call it a miracle. Others don't want to talk about it at all. Dr. Michael Grant sits at his desk late at night, her chart open before him. The clinical data doesn't match reality. She should have had brain damage, he says in voiceover. She didn't. She shouldn't have remembered anything. Yet she remembered everything. He flips through printouts, heart monitor records showing 12 full minutes of cardiac silence. 12 minutes that, by every known measure, should have ended in death. Word of Rebecca's case spreads beyond the hospital. Neurologists, anesthesiologists, and researchers begin to reach out, curious but cautious. A small team gathers to study what happened. Among them is Dr. Laura Finch, a neurologist from Chicago. On camera, she explains, we've seen patients report vivid experiences during cardiac arrest. Tunnels, lights, voices, but those are usually fragmented. Rebecca's account is detailed, consistent, and verifiable. That's rare, almost unheard of. The documentary moves through interviews and investigations, scientific voices overlaying Rebecca's gentle narration. I'm not trying to prove anything, she says softly. I just know what I saw. Experts propose explanations. Some suggest anesthesia awareness, a rare condition where patients remain partially conscious under sedation, able to hear or feel without the ability to move. But, Dr. Finch adds, anesthesia awareness doesn't explain verified visual perceptions, especially not from outside the body. Another theory, oxygen deprivation. When the brain is starved of oxygen, it can create dreamlike hallucinations. Yet her scans show no signs of hypoxia, no damage to brain tissue. She was too intact, Dr. Grant says, too clear. Rebecca undergoes psychological evaluations. No delusions, no trauma-based distortions. She's lucid, emotionally stable, articulate. The more the experts probe, the more uneasy they become. We couldn't explain it, Dr. Finch admits. And that terrifies scientists more than anything, when the data stops making sense. Dr. Grant recounts how he became obsessed. I'd sit at my desk, staring at the EKG printouts, trying to find a mistake. Maybe the machine glitched, maybe we missed something. But no, everything checked out. It was perfect. That's what scared me the most. The narration turns reflective. In medicine, Dr. Grant says, we like to think we're detectives. Every symptom has a cause. Every cause, a cure. But Rebecca's case broke that logic. It reminded me that for all our knowledge, there's still a vast space between what we know and what we believe. The section ends on Rebecca's calm smile in an interview years later. People ask if I think it was heaven, she says. I don't know. Maybe it was something science hasn't caught up to yet. But I know this. When I was gone, I was still me. And that changes everything. Her words linger as the frame fades to Dr. Grant, staring at her case file under the dim light of his office. It's not supposed to be possible, he whispers. And yet, it happened. Years have passed since that night, but time has done little to dull the memory, Dr. Michael Grant sits alone in the hospital corridor, his reflection flickering faintly in the glass wall beside him. The once bustling operating rooms are quiet now, their sterile lights dimmed. His voice, older and softer, carries the weight of a man who has seen too much. "You don't realize how fragile your certainty is," he says. "Not until it breaks." He revisits the room where Rebecca Hale died and lived again. The space has changed since then. New equipment, new paint, a new generation of nurses who have never heard the story. But as he stands in the center of the room, he feels the same cold undercurrent that haunted him a decade ago. "Right there," he murmurs, pointing to the spot where the table once stood. "That's where my world cracked open." Dr. Grant confesses that he didn't talk about the case for years. What could I say? That a woman came back from the dead and told me what I whispered while she had no heartbeat? He shakes his head. No medical board wants to hear that. Instead, he buried it, focusing on other surgeries, other patients, trying to forget. But he couldn't. Every time the monitors beeped, every time he watched a heartbeat flicker, the memory of Rebecca's flatline came rushing back. He describes the struggle within him, the war between science and something deeper, unspoken. Medicine teaches us to trust the measurable, he says. The blood pressure, oxygen, reflexes. But what about the things we can't measure? Consciousness, presence, whatever it is that lingers when the body stops. Dr. Grant admits he began to question himself. Was he losing objectivity? Had exhaustion blurred the lines between science and belief? I started reading everything I could. Near-death studies, neurology papers, even theology. I was desperate for an answer, any answer, but none came. One evening, he finds himself sitting across from Daniel Hale, Rebecca's husband. The two men share coffee in uneasy silence. Daniel finally says, "You saved her life, Doctor. You should be proud." Dr. Grant looks down at his hands. "I don't know if I saved her," he replies quietly, "or if something else did." The documentary lingers on his face, the faint tremor in his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes. "People think doctors are unshakable," he says, "but sometimes we're the ones left wondering what we really witnessed." He turns back toward the old operating room one last time. "For years, I believed science had all the answers. But that day, standing over Rebecca, watching her heartbeat return on its own, I realized there's a boundary we can't cross, and whatever's beyond it isn't ours to understand." His voice fades into the quiet hum of hospital machines. "That's where my certainty ended," he says, "and my questions began." The years have softened the edges of the memory, but they haven't erased it. In the final chapter of this story, both Rebecca Hale and Dr. Michael Grant sit in separate interviews, their faces marked by time, calm, reflective, yet still shadowed by something they can't quite define. Rebecca now lives quietly with her family in Ohio. The children who once waited for her return from surgery are teenagers now. "I still think about it sometimes," she says, gazing out a window streaked with afternoon light. "Not every day, but when I do, it feels like it just happened. Like I'm still caught between those two worlds." She smiles faintly, tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "I don't talk about it much anymore. People either don't believe me or they look at me like I've seen a ghost. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. I'm not afraid of dying anymore. Not after that." The camera shifts to Dr. Grant, sitting at his desk as evening shadows stretch across his office. The sound of rain begins to patter softly against the window. The kind of slow, steady rain that feels like time itself passing. In front of him lies a worn manila folder labeled Hale, Rebecca. He opens it, running his hand across the yellowed pages, the faded EKG strips, the handwritten notes in the margins. "People still ask me about her," he says quietly. "They want an explanation. They want something rational. A theory that fits neatly into the laws of medicine. But I can't give them that." He glances at the heart monitor graph, one moment flat, the next alive. "I was there. I watched it happen. And I still don't understand it." He leans back in his chair, eyes distant. "I used to think medicine could explain everything, but this case taught me that science isn't the opposite of mystery. It's part of it. Every answer we find only opens another door." Cut back to Rebecca. Her voice carries a soft conviction. "Some people think what happened to me was a miracle. Others say it was just my brain trying to make sense of dying. Maybe they're both right. Maybe it doesn't matter." She pauses, looking directly into the camera. "All I know is that I came back different, lighter, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to yet." The documentary moves toward its final image. Dr. Grant closing Rebecca's file, placing it gently in a drawer. Outside, thunder rumbles in the distance. "People ask if I believe in miracles," he says. "I don't know, but I believe in Rebecca's story, because I was there." The music swells softly, hauntingly, as the camera glides through the empty corridors of St. Mary's Medical Center, walls that have seen life and death, joy and grief, and something in between that no one can name. Dr. Grant's voice returns one last time. "Maybe what we call death isn't an ending at all. Maybe, for a few of us, it's a glimpse beyond the edge of what we're meant to understand." Fade to black.